Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, it's the Journalists Roundtable. We'll look at the week's top stories, including another setback to the state attorney general's fake electors case. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your public television station.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. It's Friday, and that means it's time for the Journalists Roundtable. And joining us tonight, Howie Fisher from Capital Media Services, Jessica Boehm from Axios Phoenix, and Mark Brody from KJZZ Radio. Panel, good to have you all here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sloshing through the rain late this afternoon to get over here. Howie, we're going to start with you. Arizona Court of Appeals says to Attorney General Chris Mays, not so fast.
Not so fast. Well, this is just an outgrowth of what the trial judge said. Said, look, if you're going to indict someone, and we're talking about the 11 fake electors, or they'll call themselves alternate electors, and that's a key point of what happened, and the other people, the folks who are Trump's aides and attorneys, you got to present them with all the information. You don't have to present their case for them, but they need all relevant information. In this case, one of the issues is these electors are saying, well, we weren't trying to defraud anybody, but we were just trying to be ready should the court decide that Donald Trump did not lose by 10,557 votes. There is an 1887 law, always familiar with those, to say there is a way for Congress to deal with competing states of electors. And Mays and her attorneys never presented that to the grand jurors. And what the trial judge said and what the Court of Appeals affirmed is they needed to be presented with that, and otherwise your indictment can't stand. And that goes, again, to their theory that we're not fake electors, we were just alternate electors.
Yeah, and that was the confusing part about all of this, is that some states do have a contingency plan. But Arizona didn't seem like it had a contingency plan. Here comes 1887 Elections Act, which may not be a contingency plan, but she didn't let the grand jurors know.
That's exactly right. And as Howie very clearly pointed out, you have to provide all of that information. And it now puts the Attorney General in a really kind of difficult position, politically especially. She has to decide, am I going to go back and retry this case with a new grand jury? Am I going to try to appeal? Maybe the Supreme Court has a different view than we do. We didn't know about this 1867 law. Most of us didn't anyway. So it puts her in this weird position. And of course, she also has the option of saying, like, oh, let's just forget about it. I don't think that's going to happen. And that would certainly aggravate her base. But those are kind of her options at this point.
What do you think she's going to do, Mark? I mean, those are three pretty strong options, and you're going to have to choose one.
Yeah, well, I have no idea what she's going to do. But the other complicating factor is, like, the clock is kind of ticking here, right? There's an election that she is on the ballot for coming up, in a little more than a year for the general election. And as we know, court cases take a while. So I wonder how much, like, the practicality, the reality of the calendar might play into what her decision is.
Okay, so you've got Supreme Court. You've got just drop the whole thing altogether, or you start the grand jury process all over again.
Actually, there's one other option which doesn't get used much. It's called a direct, not really indictment, and where you take your case and you present the evidence to a trial judge. Now, the downside for the Attorney General is then the defense comes in and gets to cross-examine witnesses, and I don't particularly think she wants to proceed that.
No.
I don't know. Taking it back to the grand jury, they got the indictment before. I would assume that even if you present this 1887 case, the grand jurors will indict. I don't think anything has changed factually on that. That may be the easiest. As you point out, as Mark points out, taking the Supreme Court, you're delaying it even further. Do you want to get into a situation that, let's say, for whatever reason, Chris Mays is not reelected a year from now, and halfway through the trial, all of a sudden you have Warren Peterson as the Attorney General?
Well, but that wouldn't be Chris Mays' problem anymore. What would be Chris Mays' problem is that you're going to have to run for re-election, and you've got this kind of hovering out there like a storm cloud.
Exactly. And I think one thing to remember is if we look back to last year in the presidential election, I think a lot of voters said, okay, yeah, maybe I didn't like what happened in 2020, but I'm over it. I want to talk about something else. And if this is the big thing that's happening for Chris Mays as she's running for re-election, like, it just creates a whole other can of worms that she probably doesn't want to deal with during the election.
Well, but that raises the question. You're right. She could just simply say, okay, I gave it my best bet. But you've already got folks saying this was a whole scam by her. This was weaponizing
Right.
the Attorney General's office, much as they used to talk about weaponizing the Department of Justice. And then can they use that against her if she just simply gives up and says, never mind?
Yeah, no, exactly. And especially she's made it, her verbiage has been so strong. Like, this is an assault on democracy. This is about democracy. If she just says, actually, it's not that big of a deal now. Like, yes, you're absolutely right. I think this whole situation is like puts her in a really tough spot.
Yeah, there are risks politically regardless of what she chooses, right? Like if she drops it, folks on the left will probably not be thrilled. If she pursues it, folks on the right, some of whom she will probably need to vote for her to get reelected, will not be happy. So there's really no clear-cut, easy answer here, I don't think.
But Mark, the fact that we see the video, we see what's going on, we know what's going on. It's clear as a bell what happened there.
Yeah, they didn't try to hide what they were doing.
This was not subterfuge. Does that play into this whole dynamic?
I mean, with the caveat that I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
You know, as Howie said, like the facts of the case are essentially unchanged, right? Nobody has come out and said really anything differently than what was presented to the grand jury, other than this law that was not presented to them. So, if she wants to go back and present them with this law, as Howie said, the odds are fairly decent. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but the odds are fairly decent that she could probably get another indictment. The question is, how long will that take? And to Jessica's point, like, is that what she wants to be talking about as she's also running for re-election?
And there's one other point here, which is the question, as you point out, they did it in the open. There was a similar charge, I think it was in Michigan, where the judge looked at the evidence and said, look, these guys did it in the open. Therefore, there cannot be an intent to defraud. Remember, fraud is a key claim in here. And if, in fact, a judge here would have determined the same thing, look, they didn't hide what they were doing. They weren't trying to defraud. There were a lot of steps that would have had to happen before you could actually give Donald Trump the 11 electors, then you don't have a fraud. Now, do you have a conspiracy? Well, you need an underlying crime. And then you have the forgery thing. And again, if they say these were contingent, even if they didn't label it that, this could fall apart quickly in front of a trial jury. Remember, each of those remaining defendants, one of them is kind of pled out. Each remaining defendant has his or her own lawyer, all of whom are going to cross-examine the state's witnesses. And I don't know at what point jurors start to say, okay, I give up.
Yeah, okay. Let's give up on that one. Let's move on ahead. Jessica, we got a new Congresswoman. Adelita Grijalva won overwhelmingly as expected, but there are now questions as to when she's going to get sworn in.
There sure are. Yeah, it's kind of funny because this wasn't an exciting election in the fact that we all knew what was going to happen several months ago. But yes, so she has now been elected, but she is a key vote on something that is of interest nationally, the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. She would be that magic number vote to release them. And so now there's a question of how soon she can be sworn in, and if that could kind of delay the ability to release these files.
Speaking of delay, is Speaker Johnson thinking of maybe slow walking this, or how does that work?
He hasn't really said that he's going to go quickly or not. I mean, he's got a few other things going on right now, namely the fact that the government might shut down on Tuesday at midnight. Also, the House is in recess until after that. So I've not personally heard anything about when that might be, but Jessica's right that, her vote, narrows the gap between Democrats and Republicans, but also she has said that she would sign that discharge petition to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files.
And you've also, as Mark mentioned, you've also got the government funding situation here, which as soon as she's sworn into office, she's going to play a role in that as well, along with the other Democrats.
Up to a point. Now remember, the House doesn't need the Democrats. It's the Senate that's having the problem, because the House already passed, a new bill, and they don't seem to be inclined to negotiate. But what's interesting in terms of her being sworn in is, the election has not been certified yet. There's a whole canvass that has to occur. That hasn't occurred. The Secretary of State has basically sent a letter to the House Speaker and said, look, here's the numbers. Nobody is challenging it. What are you waiting on? But there is a legal reason that the House Speaker could hold out until the certification of the election, which might not come until the end of the month.
But there's also a legal reason. I think Virginia, there was a congressperson in Virginia, same thing. The elections chief wrote in and said, it's all official, take my word for it, here's the letter, let it go.
Oh, that's different.
Sworn in the next day, Howie.
Don't you understand? It's situational ethics. I know you're shocked to know that that occurs in Congress.
I can't believe that's going. All right, so basically, we just wait around for Congresswoman Grijalva to be Congresswoman Grijalva.
Yeah, but I would say that we're talking about a matter of weeks here. Like, we're not talking like she's not going to be sworn in for years or something like that. I'm sure, yes, Democrats, of course, want this to happen as quickly as possible, but it's not as if this is like a major delay.
Yeah. All right. John Gillette, we've talked about Representative Gillette numerous times here recently, and we're talking about him again, Mark. Why are we talking about him again?
Yeah, he likes saying things that are a little bit controversial, I guess is maybe the nice way to say it. He was not happy with a member of Congress from Washington State who made some comments about that he interpreted as calling for the violent overthrow of the government, and suggested that she should be tried for treason on that. The sentence for that, of course, is death. So, after telling his colleagues at the Capitol, like, there's no room for unity anymore, you guys are the violent ones, he's now saying that a member of Congress should be executed.
Howie said, the quote was, "Until people like this that advocate for the overthrow of the American government are tried, convicted, and hanged, it will continue."
Yeah, I also noticed and the way you read it shows that he doesn't know where to put his commas, which also makes a difference in terms of how this gets done. What she said was a couple of things. She was very unhappy, but she told people to be strike ready, things like that. Now, is that in fact urging the overthrow? Even if she is saying we need to do something different, there's a trial in there, there's evidence, all the rest of that. What constitutes the overthrow? And this particularly is interesting given what happened on January 6th. How many people were there to overthrow the legally elected government, the legally elected election, so to speak, of Joe Biden? Should they be tried for treason? And so, it gets all wrapped up in there. This is going to be another one where the Ethics Committee will look at it, and like they did with his comments about Muslims, they'll say he has a right to say what he wants. And probably, again, given his legislative district, I don't think it hurts him.
That legislative district is Kingman area?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Democrats are basically saying, what does it take for Republican leadership to take action here? As Howie mentioned, they wanted an ethics probe regarding the Muslim rants. That didn't happen. I kind of doubt this is going to happen either.
It doesn't seem likely. I think that this just kind of like goes to show this place that we're at where people are, empowered in a lot of ways to say sometimes things that can be definitely perceived as a bit violent.
And what's important is some of these are the same Republicans who are saying that Annalise Ortiz should be thrown out of the legislature, have her, maybe even investigated criminally, because she repeated a Twitter post about here are these ICE officials at a school in Levine, and therefore somehow she was fomenting violence. So everybody's got an idea of where that line is drawn.
All right, Mark, let's talk about the Axon law and what's going on in Scottsdale, because Scottsdale City Council is kind of hemming and hawing. I don't know what they're doing, but a citizens group says get out of the way. Yeah,
they're really taking the charge on this and have been, concerned about this law for a while. This is a state law that is convoluted, that blocked a vote on whether or not to undo the city council decision on allowing this development in North Scottsdale for Axon. It's a company that makes tasers. And the big concern is really like the opponents really only care about or are opposed to apartments. They don't mind the new headquarters, they don't mind the hotel, they don't mind the other development, they don't want the apartments. So this group is now suing to try to challenge the state law that blocked the vote on trying to undo that. And it's, as you say, it came after the city council said, I don't know, maybe not. We're not sure quite yet. Want to keep negotiating. Not sure what we're going to do quite yet.
Hemming and hawing there, Howie.
Well, and there's some interesting questions here in terms of, can the legislature do what it wants? Well, the history here is pretty much unless it's unconstitutional. But you've got a real fascinating question here of we have essentially a constitutional amendment against special interest legislation. In other words, you can't have the legislature say, you, Ted, are now promoted to general of KAET-TV or something like that. Even if I know as much as you'd look really good with those little epaulets.
You mean I'm not?
You're only a major general.
Oh, okay.
But you look at the legislation, and the idea behind special interest is You can do things by class if the class is what they call elastic. In other words, whether other cities, other individuals can fit in and drop out. This legislation starts off with its cities of anywhere between 200 and 500,000 people. That's easy. Ancillary uses an international headquarters. Okay, now we're narrowing it. With more than 1,000 full-time employees, average annual compensation more than 125% of the median wage. And then it has to be at least 30% multifamily residential. You're now down to a point of how many other cities could this apply to?
Well, and how does the gift clause not apply to this, which I think that one of the things the citizens group is saying?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. You have this gift clause that talks about like we're not allowed to just give handouts. Now, I'm not sure how much that applies in this situation, just because they're really focused on this whole idea that you took away our ability to have an election. We have in the state constitution the right to hold a referendum on something. We wanted to hold a referendum and decide, do the voters of Scottsdale actually want this? And you, state legislature, took away our right to do that.
And they did it retroactively, and that's really the point. In other words, first of all, it is a constitutional right to refer, so we're not even sure how far the legislature can go, but to do something retroactively after it occurred, now you're in some real problems here.
And we should mention the legislature and the governor.
Yeah, the governor obviously signed the bill into law to make it take effect. So, I mean, and there was a lot of negotiation at the legislature this year about this. There were a few different iterations of this bill, different ideas of maybe what to do. There's a large presence of folks from Axon down at the Capitol all session long. So, yeah, this was not just something that the legislature did.
But the gift clause, Howie, to me, I understand voters' rights, and I think that's obviously the first thing you look at and the first thing that you would argue. But it does seem, especially the retroactive aspect of all this, it does seem if there's a gift clause in the state constitution, this is playing touch and go with that, isn't it?
Well, here's the problem. If you follow that argument, that means that every time a group comes in and gets better zoning, they're allowed 4 homes per acre, we're going to give them 10 homes per acre. That makes their property more valuable. Is that a gift that the state is giving or the city council is giving them? I think the gift clause is not as good an argument. Even if you've done this all just retroactively, are they entitled to have the city or the county or the state make a decision about what is proper zoning there?
Well, but you kind of just made the case for special interest legislation beforehand. It sounds like it's still special interest legislation.
Well, it is, but again, you can't. I don't think it's just you can challenge it under the gift clause. I think you can challenge it under the constitutional provisions of no special interest legislation. That this is something for one specific company, and nobody else could qualify.
It'll be interesting to see if Scottsdale City Council says, "Well, all right, then we're on board," or we're staying away from this.
Well, I think that, but also what, if anything, this does to negotiations, because members of the city council continue to say, we'd like to keep talking to Axon, because remember, this is a company that is not only based in Scottsdale, but was born in Scottsdale too, is a big business presence. And during this whole kerfuffle of the Capitol, a few other states reached out and said, hey, Axon, if Scottsdale wouldn't want you anymore, we'd be happy to have you here. Come build what you want here. So there's a balance here between economic development, keeping a business in town, and making sure that some number of your residents aren't too ticked off.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
and I would just say I think that's a really good point with this lawsuit. The biggest thing Axon has communicated is that time is of the essence, and that's why they didn't want this election. If this lawsuit pushes their construction timeline back significantly, at what point does CEO Rick Smith follow through on the threat he's been making for 2 years that I can just leave? And so I think the lawsuit, more than what is the legal justification, it could just have the impact of this taking too long.
Yeah, Jessica, sticking with you. John McCain's youngest son is now on the Arizona Board of Regents. Talk to us about that.
Yes, his youngest son is on the Board of Regents. Did you think you'd see another McCain in office? I think we all thought maybe at some point. I guess this isn't technically an elected office, but yes, the governor has named him the newest member who will oversee our university system. You might remember this is the McCain who announced last year that he is now officially a Democrat, was supporting Kamala Harris in the presidential election. So be interested to see where his trajectory goes.
And that's only part of it. Remember, he had started out in 2016 as a Republican, as was his dad, saying, maybe not my party. And then with his first run-in with the president, said, okay, I'm going to become an independent. So it's been an interesting transition here. Look, the family, one of the things that John and Cindy McCain have always done is they've instilled in their children a sense of duty. And here he is, he's got a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees. He's pursuing a doctorate, I think, in education. And so here's somebody who clearly knows about the universities. And now here's the really fun question. Does he get confirmed? Because he replaced somebody else who the governor had named to represent the northern tier of the state.
Right.
And they wouldn't even give her a hearing. Now, does the Republican legislature say, no, we're going to say that Jimmy McCain is insufficiently qualified?
Well, Mark, insufficiently qualified as a veteran, a businessman, a native Arizonan, I mean, that'd be a pretty big reach there, would it not?
I mean, potentially, but to Howie's earlier point, we might be all shocked to know that there is politics in government here. And the McCain family had their run-ins with the far right of the party. John McCain certainly did over the years with the the more conservative branch of the GOP here. So, I mean, I have no idea. Nobody said, I've not heard anyone say yay or nay, like this is great, this is not great. But it wouldn't be a shock to see that that maybe the confirmation isn't as smooth as some would like.
Is it a shock to see Jimmy McCain stepping up in profile here? And can we expect to be shocked later if he decides to pursue other public offices?
I mean, so little is shocking anymore, right?
Well,
Nothing shocking.
Look, what is he's 31. I mean, he's a baby, and so this could become a stepping stone. I mean, look, Fred Duval, who was on the Board of Regents, ran for governor. He didn't get elected, but it's not a bad platform to use because, as much as some of the right criticize universities and those damn liberals there and the socialism they're teaching, people like universities generally, and they like the fact that there's a Board of Regents that's trying to keep an eye on things.
Will we be hearing more from Jimmy McCain?
Oh, it would surprise me if we didn't. Yes, I think, and I've had the pleasure of meeting him. He's a very personable guy. I think everybody kind of assumed that he would follow in his dad's footsteps in some way. So we'll see what happens.
All right, we sure will. All right, Howie, before we go, it looks, I know you wrote about this. This is very important to you, the HOV lanes.
Oh, yes.
That this idea of these people with these funny little license plates driving in the HOV lanes during rush hour, that's going to end pretty soon, huh?
That is. I mean, there are probably a lot of people out there, and I know people who purposely got an all-electric car or a hybrid or one of these all-fuel propane vehicles, not because they were interested in the environment. I'm not minimizing that, because they said, look, I live in Anthem. I've got to drive in every morning. Now, if I have one of those little blue and white plates in the car, I can go down the fast lane here and basically thumb my nose at everyone else. Well, the only reason they could do that is because of a federal law that allowed states to do that, not just have them as 2+ people. Now remember, the feds are the people who helped build these HOV lanes, so the federal law that allowed that expires on Tuesday at midnight. And so if you happen to be driving in Wednesday morning and you're alone in your car with a little blue plate, you get pulled over. That's a $400 fine plus surcharges.
But it sounds like DPS is not necessarily going to be all gung-ho on pulling people over at first, at least.
I mean, it would seem reasonable to think that DPS has more important things to do than looking for people in Teslas or hybrids, in a Prius that are driving in the HOV lane during rush hour. But I mean, as Howie points out, it will be technically against the law to do that. So we'll see if that has any. I mean, there are going to be other effects to. With incentives going away and, stuff about chargers, electric vehicle chargers that are potentially the money not coming through. So, I mean, there's a lot changing potentially for, alternative vehicle technology here.
And it doesn't matter what you're driving. If you got a bunch of cars full of people, you can go in that lane.
Yeah, exactly. It's still a carpool lane, and
Yes.
you can still use it if you've got people in the car.
You just can't go whistling by yourself down there.
So that's why people have children, you're telling me?
That's why I had one. I'm kidding.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way. It's your
Thank
first
you.
appearance since that. Okay, but Mark brought up a point. The electric car industry is facing some strong headwinds
Oh,
here.
God, yes. Because what's interesting is despite the presence of Elon Musk early on in the second Trump administration, I think there are $7,000 federal tax credits to buying a new electric car, $4,000 tax credits to buying a used electric car of up to $25,000. They all disappear also on October 1st. And so if the question is, at what point do you say the extra cost of the car, the fact that I can't drive in the HOV lane, why am I doing this when I could get a little Nissan Sentra and I can get 40 miles to the gallon and not have to pay the extra?
Well, and one of the big concerns, if you talk to people in the EV world, that potential buyers has been the cost, which is one of the reasons why these incentives were so popular to help defray some of them, because generally speaking, electric vehicles are at least a little more expensive than a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So with these subsidies and tax breaks and everything going away, it will be really interesting to see what happens in terms of sales and how much people keep the vehicles if they have them already.
Yeah, and how much people will be driving in the proper lanes come rush hours.
We'll see.
Yes, we will see about that as well. All right, we got one more. Oh, we're out of time. I was going to talk about the Pornhub thing and how you have to do this and have to do that, but doggone it, How, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Well, there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who look at porn and people who look at porn and lie about it.
And basically, what? Are you saying you're both of those people? All right. Well, we're out of time. Look at that. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. That's it for now. I'm Ted. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.